Welcome to Celebrating Queens Women's Artists. As you see, we have the famous international women's artists in the loop of Mariah Carey hero, very inspirational to all of us. I'd like to give a special recognition to Hoong Krakauer. Is she in the house? Hoong is the director of the Queen's Council of the Arts. She makes things happen. She is also my mentor, and without her, I would have not gotten this far.
I'd like to share something with all the women and the wannabe women, that's men. The success that Joan is demonstrating here is an inspiration for all of us. She took something that was negative, and instead of wallowing in pity and eating way too much chocolate, maybe shopping online, she turned it into this, something to share with all of you. So I think that we all owe Joan a really big round of support. Your superpower. The power of no.
Yeah. Thank you, art boss. Yes.
Joan is an example of somebody who refused to take no and not fight. And this tonight is what she made happen. And that is possible for all women artists or all artists who face that particular challenge. Joan, beyond the goddess, has the power to actually enable other women to be goddesses in their own right by just doing what she loves, owning her own space, being passionate, and really showing people that you can make your own happiness, you can make your own careers, and she's living proof.
So this is part of my new enterprise, the Enchanted Goddess Revue. As you all know, I have a series called the Enchanted Goddess Literary Creative Arts Series. And it's supportive of women. We do writing workshops, reading workshops, and now performances. Another person that I would love to acknowledge is Ms. Maria Cora Fernandez.
Yeah.
She is an independent producer, QPTV, and she's filming this. She's starting the film careers of many of the artists here, and I'm eternally grateful to her, and she is my friend now. Thank you, Maria.
Yeah.
And her lovely assistant, Miss Tanya, in the back. And the last, I would like, but not least, Mr. Milando Jones. Special projects. And we have an all-star lineup tonight. And we're going to start with our first performer of tonight is Valerie G. Keane. Valerie G. Keane is the founder of Poetry and Coffee, a discussion group for writers and readers of all levels of experience. Valerie has been published in the Newtown Literary Journal and has been featured in numerous reading series in New York City. She speaks at high schools and colleges about how to love poetry from the bottom of your heart, from the bottom of your soul, without an MFA. She currently serves on the editorial review board for poetry for Newtown Literary. And you can find out more at www.valerieg.com. And with that, I'd like to bring the fabulous Valerie G. Keane up to the stage.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much for your constant light and your all-encompassing love. To the Queen's Council on the Arts for being in constant service to our community. And to my fellow writers and artists, it's really just so fun to be with you here tonight, and to all of you who came tonight. It just genuinely fills my heart to be all together. So we're here tonight to celebrate Queens women artists. So I've been thinking about these things: artists, women, history, Queens, a lot actually, because I've been doing research recently on women in Queens going back to the late 1800s, and these women were, that I'm researching, were bohemian cigar makers, and these women were my women, my blood, my great and great-great and great-great-great grandmothers and aunts. And these women were, so they were cigar makers, and they were mothers, and they were sisters, and they were wives and writers and sewers, and they learned new languages, and they fell in love, and they married for convenience, and they had babies, and the babies died, and they kept going, and they themselves died very young, having lived all of that, and their voices keep appearing in what I'm currently writing, and so I've been letting them speak. And I'm thinking about all that silence that those voices and my own come out of. Either the silence of these ancestors that left the earth before, long before I came to it, or the silence of what a woman is not supposed to talk about, either in the 1800s or today, and for those women in countries who would be killed for speaking up. And I think that it is our calling as women writers to honor that and write the unwritable. Or I'm thinking about the voice that comes out of the silence of just that internal silence. And because I'm really blessed to have a really full life, so I actually have to impose silence on myself. I have to make silence happen, and that can be really uncomfortable. It's a practice, called a practice for a reason. To sit with silence, or as the poet Marie Howe says, to be radically receptive. And it's that woman's voice that comes out of that stillness and silence that I think the poems that I'll read to you tonight have emerged, and I thank you for opening yourselves to that tonight. So, and you can just resist clapping or booing in between each poem. I don't know what's going to happen. Just let the silence be there. So, negotiation. Silence, you called me, but I was busy and did not answer. You spoke, and I heard my father's voice. It was years before I discovered the trick. Then I went around asking everyone, what does silence sound like? And all they would say is, what is your name, child? I gave up and went home. One morning in my garden, I made the loudest sound for no reason at all. And then I said nothing. But first, I said, I can live like this. The truth. Not that noise. The lack of noise. Like 1,000 blankets around my ears. Still, I hear something. Rushing, blowing, something like that. Hard to tell what it is, but I cannot stop searching for it or let it be. I've even forgotten what I'm listening for, but I am sure it is there. Like the bird outside the closed window, muffled and separate. No, like the beam from the lighthouse, the sound it makes through the fog. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Let's see who we have up next. Anne Bourne blogs on the Backpack Press, Tumbleweed Pilgrim. She is the author of A Marshmallow on the Bus, Prayer Beads on the Train, and Waiting on a Platform. I think we have that MTA thing here. And you will love her books. Anne is also a contributing author to Love Her Not, The Hillary Paradox, which is a national bestseller. You can catch that on Amazon and in the bookstore. She's a contributing writer, which is awesome. And it's edited by Joanne Bamberger. You can follow Anne on Wattpad, Instagram, and Twitter at Niles Site. And listen to Born in the Bronx on Our Salon Radio. Let's bring up Anne Bourne.
I am so happy to be here. I got to tell you, this is so cool. You know, I got people here, and this is really it's like my family. I have my Queen's Poet family here, and that's pretty awesome. I am the author of A Marshmallow on the Bus, and my latest book is called Waiting on a Platform, so I thought I would share some things from Waiting on a Platform. To continue the theme of silence. This is called Seeking Silence. New Yorkers like a challenge. Most of us know that it's folly to look for silence in the city. There are the cheaters, the slackers among us who think they can just sneak into a church in the middle of a weekday afternoon or look for an empty subway car late at night. They might even seek out a vacant elevator or an open staircase for a chance to glimpse silence, but they can't be satisfied. They're looking in the wrong place, because once someone crosses your path, the magic is gone. I look for the stillness. I seek out the eye of the storm. I find it in long walks along the avenues, in a glimpse of little green growing things peeking out of walls and sidewalks, or in the trace of sunlight and shadows on the pavement. The Broadway malls are pocket parks in Manhattan, patches of green that run smack in the middle of Broadway. Traffic and pedestrians run alongside and crisscross them all day, all night. Uptown, there are tables filled with domino players, and farther down, many hot dog eaters. But you can sit here and you get the feeling that the swirling, crazy, noisy, amazing city is just out of reach, just for a moment. Then you get up and try it again. Back to the city, back to the real challenge. If you're lucky, you can carry the stillness with you, because even though you wouldn't want to miss a minute of the noise in the city, it is nice to find a place to be still. And I have one tiny Queen's poem. This is called, ironically, 10 Words for Louise. Zante restaurant no longer serves heroes. Now we eat somewhere else. Thank you. I have copies of my book.
I am blown away. Third up, we have the incandescent Aida's Island. Zilelian. Ida Zilelian is a New York writer and English teacher. Hello. Her debut novel, The Legacy of Lost Things, which is totally awesome, was released March 2015, Bleeding Hearts Publications. She's also on national tour, by the way. Just saying. She was also the recipient of the 2014 Tolian Literary Award. Her work has been published in several anthologies and over 25 literary journals. Wow. She has read her work at various reading series in Queens and Manhattan. She is the curator of Boundless Tales, a reading series in Queens, New York. In 2011, her first novel, The Halloween Moon, was one of the 4 semi-finalists of the Andrew Novel Contest. She is currently working on her 3rd novel. Her website is www.idazilelian.com. And with that, let's bring up Aida.
I want to thank Joan for organizing this lovely event for QCA and everyone here that's out to support us. I'm going to give you very quick, important information. My novel is about an Armenian family who immigrates here in the 1970s, and there is a dysfunctional couple, Tamar and Levon, who get married, and their daughter, Araksi, runs away. Now, every time I do a reading, it's always about this mismatched couple because the husband is driven with jealousy, and I never focus on Araksi, who is the 17-year-old teenager. She takes off. And in the spirit of the evening, I think it's also important to look at adolescent females and not just women who are our age or older or younger, but the teens out there. So I'm going to be reading in 2 separate excerpts. The first one, you see Araksi before she ran away, and the second one, you see Araksi after she runs away. That evening, when they were getting ready for bed, he was quieter than usual. He had also been quiet throughout dinner, and he had not even bothered thanking her for making food. "How was your trip?" he asked. She was putting on her nightgown and brushing her hair. "Fine," she said. "How are your sisters?" The sarcastic edge in his voice made her nervous. "They're fine," she said. "We didn't do much." "You left suddenly," he said. Tamar realized that at some point while she was gone, Sophie must have mentioned that a man had called to speak to her. "I did," she said. "It was just as much a shock to me. You weren't here when it happened. It was horrible." "Who else did you see in San Francisco?" he asked and got up from the bed. "Just my sisters," Tamar said, trying to control the quiver in her voice. "Who called here before you left?" He moved toward her sharply, slowly, a hard glare in his eyes. "I don't know," she said. "Nobody. I don't remember." He grabbed her by the shoulders and dug his fingers in so deep that she let out a cry. "Please stop. You went all the way out there to meet him," he roared. "You little devil. I buried my mother and you go out there to see him." "I didn't!" Tamar chided herself for screaming. She always tried to keep her voice low so that the girls wouldn't wake up or hear them. "Please, I didn't see him. I didn't." Before she could get the words out, he had steered her in front of the mirrored closet and threw her against it with one hard shove. Tamar screamed as she felt the surface of the mirror crack against her back and small shards pierce into her skin. Someone was pounding from the other side of the door. "Open the door!" It was Araksi. "Open this fucking door," she screamed, and seconds later came bursting in. She looked around wildly and then saw Tamar on the floor. "Get out," Levon said. Helpless, Tamar stayed on the floor, trying not to move. "What did you do to her?" Araksi screamed. She lunged at her father and he blocked her with his arm. She spat in his face. "You fucking animal," she screamed, "you animal." She raced out of the room and came back moments later. "I'm going to call the police and the ambulance," she said, holding the phone in her hand. "Don't," Tamar groaned, struggling to stand up. Finally she did. "I'm okay, come help me." She held on to Araksi and they slowly walked out. The girl turned to look at her father. He stood with his back to her. "You're a coward," she said. "You won't even turn around to look at me. That's how much of a fucking coward you are." She took her mother to the hallway bathroom and helped her slip off her nightgown. Tamar stood in her bare feet on the tiled floor, shaking as Araksi cleaned her back with peroxide and cotton. "It's just a few cuts," she said. "Nothing is stuck in your skin. I'm going to put some ointment on them and then a large Band-Aid." Her mother couldn't speak. After Araksi was done, she walked her over to the living room and made her lie down. She covered her with a blanket, turned on one of the lamps, and left her. "What's going on?" Sophie whispered when Araksi came back into their bedroom. "Mom and Dad had a fight," she said. "Mom's sleeping on the couch, no big deal." She hoped it was enough information to quell Sophie's curiosity. As she lay in bed, she thought of her grandmother, wondering how many of these encounters she had managed to protect Araksi and Sophie from witnessing. She let her mind wander to the far reaches of her childhood, and a clear memory suddenly surfaced. She and her family were on the beach along with her grandmothers and aunts and cousins. Her mother had walked out of the ocean, and upon seeing her, her father, who had been eating lunch at the picnic table, pushed his plate aside and charged over to her with a towel in his hand. From where Araxi was standing, she could see the faint line of her mother's C-section scar and the round, dark outline of her nipples. Unbeknownst to her mother, the bathing suit was see-through. She heard him screaming at her, "Fucking slut!" He yelled and dragged her off to the side. She felt the cool hand of her grandmother, Anush, guiding her toward the water and away from the scene. Years later, Araxi would hear the word in school, slut. She would learn what it meant. Her eyes open, she stared at the darkness, slowly allowing the silence to lull her into a dreamless sleep. So this is just one piece. I wanted to read one more very small piece. In this scene, Araxi is in the Midwest and wakes up and realizes that her friend has left her and taken all of their money. The previous evening, they were practically attacked and abducted by a homeless man. And this is the scene where she walks out of the hotel room and realizes that she has absolutely nothing. She's in the middle of nowhere, and her lifeline has left her. As she walked onto the street, a hot wind grazed over her. The streets were empty. St. Louis was not the rambunctious city she had imagined it would be. In the midst of luxury hotels and corporate buildings were empty lots filled with the noise of construction work. She could hear the faint roaring of bulldozers and jackhammers echoing through the desolate cement blocks. She walked slowly at first, struggling to digest her new predicament and wondering what to do. For a moment, she stopped and looked up at the gray, clouded sky, and with immediate certainty realized that her friend had left her and was not coming back. When her money ran out, which it eventually would, she could not bear the thought of returning home. She imagined having to make a collect phone call and asking her parents to send her money so she could buy a bus ticket. The humiliation of surrender was as intense as her absolute revulsion toward her parents. And that goddamn man. He'd said his name was Tom Jones. He had told her that he had his 11-year-old daughter and they lived in a homeless shelter, and his family had refused to take them in after his wife had died of cancer. She felt sorry for him. Araxi looked up at the sky and wanted to scream. She wondered if anyone would hear her. Now she quickened her steps, tangled in her thoughts. She stalked through the streets, wandering in aimless circles, and then from a distance saw a man walking ahead of her. He looked homeless and moved with a slight limp. He stopped for a moment to light a cigarette, and from his profile she saw that it was Tom. And for a moment she stood breathless. "Hey, you motherfucker," she screamed. She waited for the man to turn around, and before she could see his reaction, she dropped her duffel bag and was running toward him in a wild sprint. She felt the hard ground beneath her feet as she pounded across the empty lot. And when she got closer, she saw a large rock on the ground and hurled it at him as if she were throwing a big baseball. The rock hit the man on the side of his face and he almost fell to the ground. She had reached him by then and shoved him down. He fell on his back, and as Araxi stood over him, kicking him in the face and ribs, shaking with an uncontrollable mania that had taken her over. "You motherfucker," she screamed, "I'll fucking kill you." Eventually, the man stood up and grabbed her by the wrist, trying to chokehold his arm around his neck. "You little bitch," he said through his gritted teeth. "You little fucking bitch." He could smell his sour body odor and the stink of cigarettes and liquor. She bit his hand, and when he pulled away, she managed to grab another rock, a larger one, and hit him until he fell to the ground again. She sat on top of him, punching. With his free hand, he hit her with his fist, and despite feeling the blow to her face, the piercing pain of it, she didn't falter. She saw a much larger rock a few inches away, and without much strain, she grabbed it. "Who's the little bitch now?" she screamed, and slammed a rock with all her might on the man's skull. He groaned. She raised the rock above her head, the weight of it in her hand so heavy that it almost fell from her grip, and again she heaved it down. She sat for a moment watching with blood seeping from his head. His legs were no longer moving. She knew that he was dead. Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, thank you.
Wow. Now, are the ladies bringing it tonight or what? This is awesome.
I feel very honored to be a part of this event. To be with women in my community as an artist, where we're all lifting each other up, I just feel like this is the way the entire world should be. I think this is the true definition of success, and that's what I got out of it tonight. That we're all just so wonderful and beautiful, and we lose nothing by reaching out and lifting each other. We gain everything.
This is Ann Bourne. I'd like to say how happy I was to be part of the Women's History Month celebration at the Queen's Council for the Arts. Joan Willett does wonderful things, pulling together some very creative, talented women. It was a moment where you really just wanted to go home and write, or sing, or dance.
Joan is such a powerhouse. This was the first event she curated, and the success of the event is a testament to that. I was really excited to be chosen as one of 10 women artists that represent our thriving borough.